The Rover tells the story of the world 10 years after the collapse of society, where in rural Australia, a depressed-looking guy named Eric sits in his car before stepping outside to go into a rundown lounge to pour himself a drink. Meanwhile, a guy named Henry, who appears to have recently caught a bullet in the leg, argues with another guy named Caleb, trying to get him to turn the car around because he doesn't want to leave his brother behind. But Caleb says no and tells him that he's dead before a guy named Archie pipes up from the back seat and tells Henry his brother would still be alive if he could have taken care of himself and wasn't such a baby, which prompts Henry to go after him, causing Caleb to lose control of the truck and crash right outside of the lounge, which Eric doesn't even notice over the sound of the music. But a guy inside notices the truck flying past the window and goes outside to see what's going on, which finally gets Eric's attention. So with their truck now stuck in a ditch, Archie hops out and proceeds to break into Eric's car and hotwire it while Caleb helps Henry out of the truck. Hearing the commotion outside, Eric comes out just in time to see them drive away in his car. So without missing a beat, he hops in their truck and with a bit of finessing, he manages to get it unstuck and proceeds to chase after them. Not long after, he manages to catch up to them, where every time he gets close, they try to scare him off by pointing their guns at him. But whenever they get a clear shot, he slams on the brakes and falls back to a safe distance, but continues to follow them. So realizing that he's not going to go away, they decide to stop the car and get out to see what he wants, where he tells them that he just wants them to give him his car back and says that he won't stop following them until they do. So Henry tells him that he's not getting it back, and when Archie tells him to piss off, Eric goes to choke him out but ends up getting knocked unconscious by Henry. Meanwhile, after waking up on the ground across from a dying soldier, Henry's brother Ray, who's also apparently taken a bullet recently, hobbles over to the soldier's Humvee and drives off to go find his brother. A bit later, Eric wakes up in the bushes, and after spending a little while looking for the keys to the truck, he finds them in a bush and starts trying to track down the guys that stole his car. So when he gets to the next town, he stops by a place selling food and asks if they've seen his car, but they say they haven't seen it, so he goes outside and spots a guy taking a leak. So he proceeds to follow the guy inside and ask him if he's seen his car, but he says no, but tells him that his granny might have seen it. But when he goes to ask Granny if she's seen it, she just keeps asking what his name is and then offers him a boy to sleep with. So he goes into another room where he finds a couple of guys gambling with a dwarf and tells them that he wants to buy a gun. So the little guy takes him outside, where as he walks to his trailer, he gets annoyed by a dog barking, so he chucks a rock at it, which doesn't seem to sit well with Eric, but he doesn't say anything. When they get inside, the guy shows him some guns and says that they're $300 each, but Eric says that he doesn't have 300 and asks him if he can do one for less, but when the guy says no, Eric decides to just paint the walls with his brains. Now armed, Eric marches back to Granny's place and demands that she tell him if she's seen his car, but Granny still ain't too concerned and tells him she wants to know his name, but when he doesn't answer, she says that she'll just call him Baby instead. So she tells Baby that she did see his car, but that it didn't stop there and just drove by, and then points out that a car is an odd thing to get so worked up about in this day and age, so she asks him what's so special about the car. But Eric just gets upset and leaves, but when he gets back to the truck, he finds a bunch of bloody handprints on it. When all of a sudden, Ray appears and asks him what he's doing with his brother's truck, so Eric tries to get Ray to tell him where his brother is, but he passes out from his bullet wound. So Eric goes back inside to the food store and asks if there's a doctor around, but the guy demands that he buy something before he'll tell him anything. So he grabs a random can off the shelf and pays for it, and the guy gives him directions to the nearest doctor. So after driving for hours, he arrives at the doctor's place in the middle of the night, where a woman named Dorothy greets him at gunpoint. So with her bodyguard keeping a close eye on Eric, she proceeds to stitch up Ray. As she works, Eric goes to wash up, but while he's at it, he hears a noise and goes to check it out, where he discovers a room full of dogs in cages. Dorothy tells him that they're all pets that people abandoned and that she needs to keep them locked up at night since people try to steal them for food. Clearly bothered by this, he walks past her and heads inside. The next morning, seeing that Ray is finally awake, Dorothy asks him to take a seat while she checks out his wound, where Eric joins them and demands that Ray tell him where his brother is, and it becomes apparent that Ray is a bit on the simple side. Ray tells him that Henry is heading south and promises to take Eric to him, so Eric tells him to get up so they can leave. But all of a sudden, an alarm goes off, which Dorothy tells him means that a car is approaching, and when she says that she's not expecting anybody, he tells her to go get her rifle. So as Eric gets ready at the window, Dorothy's bodyguard goes out to greet the cars, but immediately catches a bullet in the head, so Eric starts shooting at the guys, who turn out to be the same guys that the dwarf was gambling with. So after taking them out with sniper-like accuracy, he tells Ray to get up again, and now realizing that Eric's not screwing around, he does as he's told. So they drive through the day in silence, and after Ray says that he's hungry, they pull into a hotel for the night. Once inside, Eric demands that he tell him where they are, and when Ray says that he doesn't know, Eric asks him how the hell he plans on getting where they're going if he doesn't even know where they are. But then Ray sheepishly tells him that his brother is going to a town called Kowloon. Eric takes the bullets out of Ray's gun and goes and sits outside, where a bit later, Ray comes out and talks to some people in Chinese, and then comes and joins Eric and tells him that he just asked for directions to Kowloon, which he was planning on doing anyway. He says that since Eric doesn't know exactly where they are, he has to take Ray with him, but Eric tells him that he's taking him along because if he gets to Kowloon and his brother isn't there, he's gonna slit Ray's throat. Ray asks him why he wants his brother so bad, but Eric doesn't answer and instead asks him who he is. So Ray tells him his name, and Eric asks why he's there if his brother's in Kowloon, and Ray tells him that his brother had to get going in a big hurry and that he can't talk about it. He tells Eric that he believes in God and he knows that God and his brother don't want to see any harm come to him. But Eric tells him that God doesn't care about him and points out the harm that he's already come to and that his brother just left him behind to die. Upset, Ray goes back to the hotel room where he takes some bullets out of his pocket and reloads his gun and then takes a look out the window right as a soldier is driving by and sees him try to hide. A few seconds later, there's a knock at the door, and when somebody starts jiggling the handle, Ray fires a shot through the door. But when he goes to take a look, he sees that he accidentally just killed a girl that worked at the hotel. Suddenly, the soldier that was passing by starts shooting at him, so he scurries back inside and fires back a few times as the soldier proceeds to turn his room into Swiss cheese. Hearing the gunshots out back, Eric goes around to the front to check it out and then sneaks up behind the soldier and takes him out with a single shot. He then goes to collect Ray so they can get out of there. As they continue on their journey to Kowloon, they drive all day and set up camp for the night, where Ray asks Eric what he used to do for a living, and Eric tells him that he used to be a farmer. Ray asks if he was ever in the military and if that's where he learned how to shoot so well, but Eric doesn't answer. So Ray starts to ramble about a farm he grew up nearby, and when Eric asks him why he's telling him about it, he confesses that he's just trying to stop thinking about the girl that he killed at the hotel. So Eric tells him that he should never stop thinking about a life he's taken, since that's the price he has to pay for taking it. The next morning, Ray gets up early and wanders off to drop a deuce, and while he's gone, Eric is found by the military and arrested, but Ray sees him being taken away and watches from a distance. When they get him back to their base, the soldier tells Eric that he's going to be sent to Sydney and that it's over for him, but Eric says that it's been over for him for a long time and asks why they don't just shoot him instead. The soldier says that he's just doing it for the paycheck and that he doesn't really care what they do with him when he gets there. Eric then reveals that 10 years ago he murdered his wife and confesses that one night he followed her to a man's house and caught her cheating on him, so he killed them both and buried them in a hole out back. He says that nobody ever came after him and he never had to answer for what he'd done, and that knowing it didn't even matter ended up hurting him more than having his heart broken. But suddenly a man screams from outside and there's a couple shots fired before Ray comes charging in and guns down the soldier. Ray checks with Eric to make sure that's everybody and then tells him that he thought it was going to be way harder getting in there. He then cuts Eric free and excitedly explains his little rescue mission as he leads him out of the base and back to the truck. As they keep driving, Ray complains about a pain in his side, and now actually starting to give a crap about him, Eric decides to pull over and clean up his bullet wound a bit before they continue on and stop for fuel. Where the guy there tells Eric that he doesn't accept Australian money and only takes US dollars, and Eric argues that it doesn't matter since all money's pretty much worthless now anyway. But before things get heated, Ray strolls up and pulls out a fat wad of cash and casually pays for the gas and even buys them both some more bullets. Once they finally make it to Kowloon, Ray points out the house that his brother Archie and Caleb are staying in and says that they should be alone in there except for the old man that lives there. So Eric tells them that they'll go in the morning so that there'll be less trouble. That night, Ray asks Eric if he's gonna kill his brother, but Eric just tells him to go to sleep. So Ray says that there's a bunch of money in the house that they can take while they're at it, but Eric again just tells him to go to sleep. The next morning, they drive up to the house and park across the street and quietly make their way up to the house where Eric finds his car parked out front. But as Ray walks up to the house, Eric quietly gets into his car. Confused, since he hasn't mentioned his car this entire time, Ray asks him what he's doing. Eric hesitates for a minute and then gets out and tells Ray to stay put while he goes and scopes out the house. He comes back and tells Ray that everybody's asleep and that there are 2 in the back and 2 in the front, so he tells Ray to get the 2 from the back and bring them to the front, but tells him not to do any shooting. When they get inside, Eric wakes up Caleb and Archie, while a nervous Ray wakes up Henry, who's surprised to see him not only alive, but also pointing a gun at him. Eric brings Caleb and Archie to the front and makes them sit on their hands and then asks Ray what's taking so long, but when Ray looks away to answer him, Henry grabs his gun and tells Ray to drop his and asks him why he's doing this. So Ray asks him why he left him behind, and Henry says that he thought he was dead and tells him again to put the gun down. An emotional Ray tells him that they were supposed to be brothers, but he just left them to die. But when Eric asks what's going on, Ray accidentally pulls the trigger and hits the wall, so Henry fires back and hits Ray in the neck. So Eric immediately shoots Archie and Caleb when he sees Ray dying on the floor, but by the time he walks over to him, Ray is already gone. Now losing his brother for the second time, Henry breaks down and cries. When Eric comes around the corner, Henry stops and demands to know what he did to his brother. Eric tells him that he didn't do anything, but Henry insists that he did, and when he gets up, Eric shoots him too. He thinks about killing the old man, but decides against it and just sits on the bed across from him and starts to cry. He then drags all of the bodies, including Ray's, out of the house and piles them on some wood out back and burns them. A bit later, he sits in his car at the side of the road before getting out and grabbing a shovel out of the trunk and walking until he finds a good spot. He then returns to the car and pulls out something in a blanket, revealing that the only reason that he wanted his car back so bad was so that he could bury his dead dog.